A very good evening to all of you. I'm Dr. Chaitra Bharat, and I extend a very warm welcome on behalf of Phoenix Academy to our panelists today and all the participants. Before we start the webinar, I'd like to lay out a few instructions for all the participants. That is, all the participants, please keep your audio and video off at all times. You can use the chat box for whatever queries you have. You can also post your questions to the speaker in the chat box. All questions will be taken at the end of the presentation. So once our speaker finishes his presentation, only then we will be taking the questions one by one. The link to download your e-certificate will be provided in the chat box, and you can click on that link and fill up the feedback form to get your e-certificates. Now I would like to introduce our guest for today, Mr. Shailendra Tiwari from Fasal. Shailendra Tiwari was working for a company in Bangalore when he and his friend Anand Verma started scouting for land to grow bell peppers around Bangalore. As they did that, they understood that irrigation, quality and quantity of it was difficult to determine and execute at farm level. With the problem at hand, they established Fasal, a climate smart, data-driven solution to agriculture in the year 2018. Fasal started off with a seed funding of $1.6 million from Omnivore. An arm of Japan's Mistletoe, Mount Parker Ventures, and Zeroth have also pumped in funds. The company, which has already onboarded corporate vineyards such as Grover Zampa, has plans to enter Indonesia's coffee and chili farms in the near future. Shailendra is featured in the Forbes 30 Under 30 Asia of 2020. We are indeed privileged to have him with us on this webinar today. I'm sure we're all ready and set for a very inspiring session ahead. I welcome Mr. Shailendra Tiwari to this webinar, and now I hand it over to him. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Chatra. That was a very warm welcome extended, and I believe your team has done very good amount of research to set the context of who we are, why we started Fasal in the first place, and where we are in our journey to build a meaningful solution for Indian farmers who are doing horticulture. And when you mentioned about 2018, I think it sort of took me into a flashback of memories where I and Anand were discussing someday in 2017 about growing pepper. So essentially the idea when we started, Fasal is actually not a venture which we started, but I believe it's a venture which found its way through us. That is the right way of putting it. I believe it was somewhere in 2017 where I mean, there's some context needed as well. Both of us come from farming family. In fact, Anand, who's my partner, he comes from a family which has been growing vegetable seeds since last 3-4 decades. And had a fair amount of expertise in terms of growing vegetables, to say the least. We both got educated, came to Bangalore, started our job. We had jobs around IT sector. I think once you're a farmer, you're all, I mean, there is a seed in you, which sort of tells you that you belong to open field. And maybe, I don't know how to say it, but not in closed offices. I think that would have been the driving force. We wanted to do something on the weekends. We wanted to start growing something as a weekend exercise, to say the least, with an essence that we'll have some model around it in terms of the business, and it would be something that we would do for joy. I think that's where Fasal would have started. We did try growing colored capsicum. We tried growing colored capsicum in our balconies to start with. We tried hydroponics. We had, let's say, for an urban balcony farmer, we had reasonable success. We could grow, we could eat, and it was joy. But I think somehow this plan turned into the idea that we could make it slightly bigger, maybe take a farmland, try growing something there, and then see what we can do with that produce. Whether, I mean, our office is in HSR, and initially we thought that we'll go and sell it to QSR and restaurants in HSR. It was still a lot of fun, we were doing it for fun. There was no other reason to do it. Agriculture is what civilization is. You go to the farms, you feel good about yourself, you engage with yourself with nature, it heals you. That is what we started doing, I believe, somewhere in 2017, without going into the specifics of it. But the realization was that being an urban farmer was vis-a-vis being an actual real farmer who feeds the country. These are two very different job sets. They require very, very different skill sets. They require very different kind of confidence and knowledge as well. Which, I mean, we had delusion that we have it, but we did not. We started figuring out the way in which we could learn quickly, do some experiments around growing, and then see where it goes. And we tried once, not the kind of success that one would have wanted. And we started looking out for ways in which we can improve our practices, and that led to a spiral of learning, in which we had the opportunity of taking help from some consultants, but crops are growing 24/7, 365. We couldn't find somebody who would be available on the farm all the time as the crops are. This also sort of piqued our interest in understanding how are other people doing, how are other people succeeding in making those decisions that we are sort of failing. Whether it is about the right irrigation, whether it is about right fertigation, whether it is about right kind of disease management practices, whether it is about right kind of pest management practices, whether it is about managing the risk of climate per se. There was a lot of gaps, and our interest took us to many farms, where we saw that people were growing at least better than us. Whether it was in and around Bangalore, Karnataka has many good farmers, to say the least. We also had an opportunity of visiting a few farmers in Maharashtra. When we went to our hometowns, we had opportunity of meeting some more farmers around horticulture. And after 6-7 months of doing this exercise, meeting farmers and visiting their farms and looking at their canopies and seeing how they have managed the farm, there was one thing which was common. The common thing was that almost every time we would ask a question around how did you decide that you are going to, let's say, do operation X on the farm or operation Y on the farm, there was some consistent answers, and that those consistent answers that did not sort of fit in with our values of decision making. So for example, for a product manager, which I was before this, you do everything for very solid reasons. I'm going to do this, this, and this because these are the 5 reasons that are taking me there. But sometimes you may go and ask a farmer that if you are irrigating today, why are you irrigating today? He would typically come and tell you that we have been doing it for a long time. But that's not, that's not probably the best answer that one could have. Or our disease management practices. Why are you spraying? This is the calendar day schedule. But the calendar day schedule is same for you here in Karnataka, to a farmer in Maharashtra, and to a farmer in MP. How isn't it different? And then there were not only these questions, but there were many such questions for which we did not get the kind of response that we were hoping for. And one could go deeper. There were farmers who very clearly knew why they were doing this. So there were farmers who told us that these are the mathematical models that they go and look at. They look at transpiration, they look at the crop canopy, and there were certain other things. And they had a very fair answer of saying, this is why I'm irrigating today, or these are the 5 conditions that led me to say that I'm going to irrigate, or let's say I'm going to spray for disease X, or take a prophylactic spray for disease X or Y or Z. And this gap was very interesting to us. So we met farmers who had made losses season after season, and we met farmers who had made profits season after season, and sizable profit. After 6-7 odd months of doing this exercise and learning around that, some of our assumptions was that agriculture is risky. There is a lot that is left to God, and then there is some, and there is some control and there isn't a lot of control. But apart from that, inherently agriculture, or I wouldn't say agriculture, but I mean, our experience has largely been around fruits or vegetables or plantation. So our feeling or hypothesis was that horticulture in itself, if done in the right way, is a profitable venture. It's not a loss-making proposition. It is also sort of a business which has a lot of dynamics playing around. So how does your production go? What is the cost of production? What is the quality of production? And then there is a market which pulls that produce. If the market is favorable, you are going to make money. If the market isn't favorable, you are going to lose money. But then if you look at industries now, the industries try and squeeze their production processes, mechanisms, systems in a way that the cost of production is as less as it can be, so that the dependency on market forces to reward at a better times and to punish in odd times could be controlled. And the more deeper we started understanding the economics of the crop and the dynamics around it, the more we started realizing that horticulture is a venture, is a business venture, and it must be run that way. There must be clear understanding of why I am growing what I am growing. That must be dominated by market forces, not because that we've been growing this crop for the last 10 years. And this is the only crop that we probably can do well, which is again a sociological challenge, but we'll park it aside and talk about it later. Inherently, the cost of cultivation itself, you could create a pie chart and say that fertigation has cost X, disease management has cost Y, pest management has cost Z, labor management has cost A, and so on and so forth. Whether all of these costs are optimized, whether the outcome of all of this is optimized. And this only made that spiral go more deeper. We wanted to know. And then in the year that we were doing all of this, we were doing some more study on other countries which were doing horticulture especially well. And somehow our eyes stopped at Netherlands. And they stopped there because in 2016, if I remember right, Netherlands exported about $1.6 billion worth of tomato, which was fascinating because we have a lot more land than Netherlands does. We have a lot more farmers who are growing tomato. And we aren't the largest exporters of tomato in the world. And it's a good question to ask why. We are probably one of the largest horticulture producers in the world, but our export is abysmal. We do about anywhere between 2.5% to 5, 6, 7%. If I remember, my mind is recollecting the numbers right. And this made us wonder, what does a Netherlands farmer do well that we aren't doing well? And then, the dynamics around export, that you need to have certain specific MRL, you need to have certain specific quality of the fruit. Why aren't we getting those quality of the fruit? Then we started studying what is a Dutch farmer doing that an Indian farmer isn't. And that's where, that moment could be called the moment of genesis of Fasal, the moment where the idea of Fasal was born. Spent quite some time learning about how to do agriculture right. What does Netherlands do well? How do they decide they are going to get quality X? And how do they decide that they are going to get quantity Y? How do they control all of this? How are they controlling the climate risk? How are they controlling the risk of making a costly decision on the farm? And then we realized that, horticulture, agriculture is a scientist business which is done by all of us. Agriculture is deeply scientific in nature. It's on the interaction of the soil, the climate, the people, and many social aspects towards it. If you look at Western countries, or if you look at countries who are doing agriculture right, there are certain very fundamentals that they have got right. So fundamentals about input. What am I going to feed my crop? How am I going to treat my crop? When am I going to treat my crop? It's like we found sort of a vague analogy to some of the practices that we have. It could be or could not be right and can be debated. But one of the analogy that we said, I mean, the practice of calendar days is like this. Because there is a risk of fever to a human being, let's take paracetamol every 4th day, which did not make sense. And that is where Fasal was born. The idea of Fasal was that, or is, the idea of Fasal is that when a farmer makes a farm level decision, that decision has to take care of every aspect that is required to be considered in that decision making. Or when a farmer makes a decision about input, let's say disease management, that input or that input exercise, that execution must be backed by science, not by something else. Or the idea that climate is a risk is whether it is something that we can understand before something happens. So what does one need to know in terms of the climate to understand how his crop is going to behave 4 days later? And you know, crop in itself, I mean, if one of the fundamental methods that I have recollected over past 3-4 years is that we go to the farm, we look at the leaves, and you know, we look at the plant, and then we decide that we have to do something about it. But the problem with that approach is that a plant is a late indicator. It's a late laggard indicator. It doesn't tell you what is going to happen, but it tells you what has happened in past. That means you're always late. You're always reacting to the situation on the farm, not proactively managing that situation. Even if we make comparisons between, let's say, a business and a horticulture farm, which I believe now strongly is a business only and must be treated that same way, is that in a business, if you have certain dynamics which are changing, you go and actively, for example, you know there is going to be a labor shortage. You try and keep indicators in place that, oh, probably I would have labor shortage, so I need to maybe do double time, or I may need to provide some incentive to my people to sort of stay on the job. Or let's say if you have the problem of, you know that probably there is going to be power cut, you would arrange a generator. We used to question these things. Why aren't we doing that already? Why aren't we dealing with a disease before, I mean, when there is a chance of it to happen, I mean, instead of when it has already happened? What is the logic of going to farm and saying half of the crop is gone? That's where Fasal came into picture. The idea behind Fasal was to provide farm level, crop specific, crop stage specific, precise, actionable intelligence to the farmer, so that he can go and do something about it. So the difficulties that we found is that a lot of us are doing horticulture. It is based on our practices. It is based on our learning. It is based on the fact that we learn by making mistakes. But learning by making mistakes is probably the worst way of learning. So how do we not make mistakes? And how do we look at our mistakes what mistakes we're going to make five days down the line and fix them already? And then we found differences in terms of understanding of people in the ways that they were managing a crop, in terms of backgrounds of our farmers, in terms of the exposure to the depth of knowledge of that crop and so on. And we said if there is a way, in which the country would one day, all the farmers in the country would one day wake up and have access to an entomologist, a physiologist, pathologist, an agronomist, a soil scientist, that would be the best day possible, because they will be making most of the decisions right, and even a weather forecaster. So we said, how do we make this happen? What is the way to do it? That's where we started thinking about building Fasal. How can we ensure that we are making right farm level decisions, and how do we ensure that we are making them? What is the solution to it? We started learning about agriculture. We started learning about horticulture. We started learning about grape. We started learning about tomato. We started learning about what goes on from day of transplantation, or even the day when you have started propagation of seeds, to the day of transplantation, to the day of end harvest. What does it take? What all things happen? How to make those decisions right? What to consider when you're making those decisions right? How do we build something meaningful in which a farmer, irrespective of his understanding or exposure to the crop, irrespective of his ability to understand scientific aspects, irrespective of his the geography in which he is, irrespective of other things, irrespective of his soil, irrespective of his crop. How do we ensure that every day when a farmer wakes up in the morning, he honestly knows what he has to do, and he knows it for the reasons he has to? And it's not like our farmers don't know, but you know, it's like this. I'm wearing a specs, right? So if I take it off, I can't see things very clearly. That is what a farmer, a general farmer, would feel when he wakes up in the morning. I have to do these 4 or 5 things in the next 3 or 4 days, probably because of these reasons. But the moment I put this glass, I can see everything very clearly. I know that on the screen I am seeing 4 people. I am seeing there is a button called participants, there is share screen, and so on and so forth. I know mute. I know where I have to move my cursor to go and mute this. I know where is the cursor for me to go and stop my video. I know everything. This is what Fasal is for horticulture. The idea is that when a farmer wakes up in the morning, he knows what he has to do, what farm operations he has to do, when he has to do those farm operations very clearly. And this should be made so simple that there isn't a learning curve. So we said if there was a way to convert all of this science at the very farm level, so you are understanding the plot. Assume that you have a 4-acre farm. There are two plots. In one plot you're growing, let's say, tomato. In one plot you're growing something else. You can understand that specific plot. You understand what is happening with the soil. You understand what is happening within the microclimate. You understand what is happening on the macroclimate. You understand what is the stage of the crop, what is the seed of the crop. You understand what have been the farmer practices in the past. You understand how does the farmer execute certain things. So whether he has drip irrigation or not, whether he has fertigation unit or not, whether he has availability of labor or not, and so on and so forth. And then all of this combined, you are able to tell him that wake up today at 5 p.m., take a prophylactic spray for disease X. At 11 a.m., go and do scouting for this particular pest. Look for their eggs. If you find them, go and take a spot spray. Or tell him that by 5 p.m. today evening, go and irrigate your crop. Ensure that you are irrigating about 1 liter per plant. Or probably you are going to sell, your harvesting is very close. The market close by to you is providing you a cost of X rupees per kg or Y rupees per kg. But there is another market within 100 kilometers, 120 kilometers, which looks like there is a probability of higher revenue realization. I mean, if that's a possibility, keep a watch on this market and arrange loaders and do the supply chain marketing and so on. It should be made so simple. The science behind agriculture must be made so simple that it should be easy for anybody to go and execute. It's just like business, you know, when you are making a decision, you have a team and the team helps you understand the dynamics of those things, and you understand the broad macro inputs, and you understand these are the choices that I have, and you make one choices and you go forward. That is exactly how all decisions on the farm should be made. And what started us, to be very honest, is in early 2018 and fag end of 2017, we were doing some pilots and we were trying to see what impact does it make, whether there is a decrease in the cost of cultivation, there is lesser risk as compared to the risk that farming inherently has, whether there is a better outcome in terms of quality or quantity, what happens? And we were very pleasantly surprised at the results. So we could almost see that in every farm where we were running a pilot, we had more produce as compared to the produce that the farmers would have made in the last 2-3 seasons. We almost in all of those farms, I believe, we had lesser cost of input management. Almost all of the farms saw that the fertilizer was used better because they weren't, there were very less incidences of leaching, nutrient leaching. And what truly elated us during that time was that there was a farmer gentleman who was growing onion. And then we could see those onion bulbs, and that onion was regarded as the best onion in the region in that year. So we said somehow this works. If we could, go ahead and take it to a few million farms in India, it will change the ecosystem. And how? It's like assume that your cost of cultivation of chili is, let's take for a typical farmer about 6, 7, 8, 9 rupees or whatnot. So in a scenario where you're parallelly making a lot of right input decisions, where does this cost of cultivation go? So can it be, instead of 9 rupees, can it be 4.5 rupees? Or instead of 10 rupees, can it be 6 rupees or whatnot? That means if the market is it very responsive, you would still have a lesser chance of putting the entire produce at risk. And that is what essentially Fasal has become. The idea of Fasal is to provide farm level, crop specific, crop stage specific, actionable intelligence to the farmers in the medium, on the medium that they are available and in the language that they understand. So essentially, when a farmer wakes up in the morning, he knows these are the 5 things that he has to do on this plot, and these are the 5 things he has to do on that plot, and these are the 4 things he needs to keep an eye on for the next 3-4 days. There are certain aspects where we focus a lot. So for example, in case of tomato or chili or grape, irrigation is paramount. So we said, how can we build methods in which we are doing crop stage specific, soil texture specific, precise irrigation. And we almost always save a few lakh liters of water in every farm that we have gone so far. We started working on disease. We realized that they were very complicated in nature. We traced back, we moved back, and we said, let us try and understand how does a pathogen behave. When does it, sporulate faster, or when does it sporulate slowly, or in what condition is it going to be a, outbreak issue? How much time does it take for the outbreak to happen? What is the perfect stage to go and take a preventive, and what is the perfect stage to take a, curative, whether if we have to take one? Or in terms of pest, when do they grow? When do they grow slower? When are they laying eggs? How many generations of the population they are going through in one season, in one plot, at the very plot level? What does the farmer need to know? When does a spray behave in its best efficient manner? All of these questions are the questions that are answered by Fasal. Fasal essentially is could be considered as a 2-piece solution. The first piece is taking every data input that could possibly contribute in decisions. For example, decision about irrigation, how to do irrigation. So think about it. For every crop at specific stages, there is an optimum amount of water availability that's well suited for the crop. What is that water availability? How do we understand that? How do we understand the nature of soil, the texture of that soil, and in what way are the roots, growing. How do we understand at what rate the soil or the crop is transpiring? What is the rate in which the water or is being lost by the farm? How do we understand what kind of stress the crop is in? So at the back of Fasal is a lot of data collection. This data collection is done by some low-cost IoT devices that we have developed. There is other sources of data that is collected. There is imagery as a source that we have been using to understand the farm. So there are farmer practices, whether you have done this or whether you have done that or not, whether you have seen this or not, whether you have seen that or not. All of this at the backdrop is what we call the data collection part. So Fasal is a platform which is agnostic of the way in which we collect data. We could collect data through IoT devices. We could collect data through imagery, whether it is from phone or whether it is from satellite or drones and so on, whether it is a future technology that can give us these reasons, these parameters that we are trying to understand from a farm. And then on the front side of Fasal are a lot of algorithms. Algorithms is, how do I simply put algorithm? So algorithms is a sequence of decision making. Sequence of making those decisions. So a lot of algorithms. An algorithm to understand what should be the irrigation recommendation for a crop like tomato or a crop like chili or a crop like wine grape. Then algorithm to understand the epidemiology of mildew or blight, or a model to understand the growth pattern of mealybug. A lot of algorithms. And then at the very front facing, at the very farmer facing are mechanisms of delivery. So you could have a mobile app, a Fasal mobile app on your Android phone, which would tell you these 5 things needs to be done today. Did you do it or not? Or it could be something as simple as SMS. If a farmer may or may not have a smartphone, whether if he has a feature phone, he could get SMS dynamically telling him this is what you need to do today, sir. This is what you need to do tomorrow, sir. If you miss this, you are going to miss X kgs of produce. This is going to impact your produce. Or a farmer or an agri institution. So seed companies, they have research farms, for example. They are far away. There are so many research farms in Renevenur. And folks are sitting in Hyderabad or they are sitting in Bangalore. They could know exactly what is happening on that farm. What are the conditions in which that farm is growing those crops. This is what makes Fasal. So a data collection side, which is agnostic of the way in which data is collected. The engine side, the brain, we like to call Fasal as the brain of the farm, which is making decisions, which is trying to help the farmer take a decision and help him execute it the right way. So at the centerpiece is the brain, the algorithms, and the front is what you look simply as a mobile application, which consumes all of this very complicated data and produces something as simple as saying you need to irrigate by 4 p.m. today, or the risk of blight is high. You need to go and scout and take a spray and so on. So that is what Fasal is. In its vision, essentially the larger vision is that we should enable the entire horticulture ecosystem to make right decisions on daily, hourly basis, and in turn reduce the risk of horticulture, the inherent risk, and produce more output, more quality output. And you know, we believe that in a day, on a year when we have been extremely successful, India will be exporting a lot more horticulture than it generally is. Our farmers will be making more money than they are doing. Our farmers will be spending lesser money in terms of input than they are doing. And agriculture or horticulture as an enterprise isn't reflected as something which is unprofitable. So that is what Fasal is. We have had the privilege of working with farmers in the regions of Karnataka. We have, and we are working with farmers in the region of Maharashtra. We are working in Chhattisgarh. We have the privilege of working with farmers in south of MP, the chili region. We are currently doing about 10 crops. At the core of fasal is a crop. The crop is the problem and fasal is the solution for it. We are doing about 10, 12 crops right now. There's about 4 or 5 additional crops are in research mode. We are trying to build these models and trying to understand the pest and disease and their dynamics around that crop. Believe in next 2 to 3 years, we should be impacting a lot bigger spectrum of horticulture than we are doing right now. So that's sort of a sum total of what we are doing at Fasal, why we are doing at Fasal, and how we are doing at Fasal. Dr. Chaitra.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your experience and all the kind of work that you're doing with the Indian farmers. That's very inspiring. Now we'll take some questions that we have from the audience. The first question, Dr. Love Kumar wants to know, can you please suggest suitable variety of colorful capsicums for Chhattisgarh?
So this is an answer I will leave best on my team. I would probably appreciate if Dr. Love can sort of reach out to us. I will connect him to the researchers on the team and they will be more than happy to help him.
Okay, sir. All right. Mr. Ram Mohan wants to know how accurate is Fasal solution if it is installed in a 5-acre farm? This is the first out of 3. The second one is, what metrics does Fasal solution provide for a particular horticulture crop? And what's the success rate by using Fasal solution?
Sounds good. So it's a good question. I will simplify some more things about Fasal. So when we started building, the idea was that we should be able to represent a solution for India, especially Indian horticulture. And what that means is that as a country, our average land holding, or I wouldn't say average, but the bigger chunk of land holding for horticulture is up to 1 hectare.
Okay.
So we wanted to build a solution in which the ROI is not a complex mathematics for a farmer. It should reflect value if a farmer has 1 hectare or more. And it should reflect value proposition in the way that it should be very easy for a farmer to understand. So for a 4-acre or a 5-acre farm, let's say if you are growing, Dr. Love asked a question about chili or capsicum. Let's take that family. We have almost always seen 4 or 5 tons of higher yield. We have almost always seen better quality of that yield, higher index of that yield. We have almost always saved, again, a few lakh liters of water. And when we talk about accuracy in terms of irrigation, I think we've got it very right, as close to what we want it to be. In terms of disease management, it is slightly challenging. So we take, the method that we said we will go and conquer is, let's take those 20% disease that cause 80% harm. So for example, in case of chili, let's say mildew, powdery mildew. Essentially, in terms of forewarning powdery mildew at farm level, there are experience that say that our farms did not get powdery mildew with just those sequence of preventives that we suggested. So in terms of accuracy, it is, I think, achieving 80, 85%, 90% accuracy is something that we have done for a lot of our models. We have quite a few really smart researchers, agri researchers on the team. There are models where we have been more successful. There are models where we say that when we say that chance of something like this is going to happen and you don't do anything about it, you will see that disease or pest as a problem in the farm in whatever the incubation period is. So the question about accuracy, I think in terms of irrigation, we have got it very right. in terms of disease or pest management, there are models that have a hit rate of about 8 times out of 10 times, and there are models which have a hit rate of about 9.5 times out of 10 times. And this has been achieved by, involving a lot of really smart agriculturists who understand those diseases, who understand what does a pathogen do, when does it really become a risk, when it is not a risk, what suppresses the risk, what increases the risk, and how to think about it from a perspective of crop risk. So you could have a risk of something like that to happen, but it could be a lower risk, and that lower risk is lesser than the cost of managing that risk. So I would say from an accuracy perspective, it could vary anywhere between getting it almost entirely right to being 70, 80, 90% right. In terms of irrigation, we are actually sort of very happy with what progress we have made in terms of these crops and the irrigation recommendation modeling. From the perspective of some of the things that we are trying to do is to forecast rainfall at a very local level. Rainfall is something that's a challenge to farmers. Sometimes, I mean, the only time I have heard from one of our farmer gentlemen being unhappy or feeling lost was, we had a 200 mm rainfall. I mean, nobody could predict it. So in that way, I think we have a lot more progress to make, but it's still a lot better than what you generally get. So the matrix is that we have recommendations around irrigation, recommendations around fertigation, disease management, pest management, and climate risk. The accuracy is anywhere between, we have got it almost entirely right, to anywhere between 75, 80, 90%.
Even the least, that would be, let's say, 70% is also a very huge leap in technology towards farming, I must say.
It definitely is. And then, it's like this. So if it's like I took this off and I can't see you properly, and then I'm going to see where I mean, assume that you are sitting close to me. I'm trying to, okay, where are you? And vis-a-vis, I know 70% you are there. So it does save money because from a farmer's standpoint also, we'll have to be extremely considerate of the fact that if that plot fails, he's going to lose a lot of money. So he's going to do whatever it takes to save that crop because that's his livelihood. But getting it 70, 75, 80% right. I mean, for a certain crops, like if you get irrigation right, irrigation is like a domino. If you're growing chili and if you are irrigating right, you'll not have root disease, you'll have better produce, you have higher quality of the produce. So I would say this, that if tomorrow we would all wake up and our country has got agriculture 60% better tomorrow itself, you will have an year that we will forget COVID happened and remember that agriculture happened. Correct. So 60, 70%, 80%, I agree with you, it's a leap.
Definitely. Our next question is from Mr. Ramjan Pathan, and he wants to know what are the sensors that you are using and what is the minimum area and maximum area that can be covered with one set of sensors?
Definitely. So it's a good question and it's a complicated question. The idea behind sensors are nothing but they are a representation of truth of the farm. So think about it in this way. If you are, let's say, if rainfall is something that you care about for a specific crop, rainfall, we have seen rainfall changing between 2 points which are 700 meters apart. We have seen reasonable difference, but it's not enough. It could be managed through a software algorithm. But for a rain or macro aspects of the climate, rain, your wind direction, wind speed, pressure, these things don't change a lot in 100 to 400, 500 meter radius. A lot being the key word. But micro parameters like your canopy's temperature, your canopy's humidity, your soil temperature, your water availability, these things change. So what you need to understand is you need to understand where is this change happening. So assume there is a 40-acre farm. In that 40-acre farm, it's all the same topology. The soil texture is same. The water absorption capability of the soil is same. You have a pressure compensated drip system. The varieties are same. They've been, let's say, transplanted at the same time. You wouldn't find a lot of difference. So, maybe 5 spots where you are collecting data in a 40-acre farm would be more than enough. But consider that you are growing 5 varieties of crop in 5 acres, and they have all been transplanted at different times. They have very different canopy structures because canopy creates its own microclimate. They have their different canopy structures. They have different soil textures. So every soil, every plot is absorbing, let's say, water in a different way. Then you will need to understand it in more places. So the rule of thumb that we have is that for a 3-acre crop, if you have similar soil texture, if you have crop which has been transplanted or pruned at the same time or defoliated at the same time, one sensing unit, one hub where you are collecting microclimatic data, solar data, soil data, macroclimatic data, I think that should suffice. So to answer it deeply, it's a difficult question to ask. It depends on a lot of parameters. To answer it, 3,000 feet level, 3 acres, same crop, same soil texture, 1 unit is enough.
Right. Okay. Vaka Rohilla, I hope I pronounced the name correctly, is asking, are you using artificial intelligence along with GEO satellite to collect data and predict results as well as probable threats to crops?
All right. So artificial intelligence is probably a term which is too broad. I would take it slightly deeper. So we talk about irrigation. So when I say that our system is able to tell a farmer to irrigate precisely at time X or Y, how do we do that? So assume that at 8 a.m. in the morning, we tried understanding what is the availability of water in the soil, and we got a certain number. Now that number should be matched by what is the crop stage and what is the requirement of the crop. Assume that number matches the requirement. Now water is, because of transpiration, evaporation, and X number of other phenomena going within the farm, water is continuously being lost. Right. So we need to understand at what rate is water being lost, and at what rate this losing of water becomes a problem. So in that case, you need to do some prediction. How will you predict? You'll try and understand what would be the rate of transpiration over next 12 hours. What will be then other stress factors? What will be other physiological factors that would enable the crop to lose? Or what will be the factors that will enable the crop to not lose? Transpiration stops. That's where you need to start predicting. The moment you need to start predicting something, that's where your broad term of artificial intelligence comes into picture. That's where we consume a lot of machine learning. So we try and predict aspects like microclimatic, understanding temperature and humidity conditions for next 2, 3, 4 days within this crop canopy. That's where we leverage a lot of machine learning. That's where you'll hear all the fancy terms about, modeling or about data engineering and so on and so forth. In terms of imagery is a prospect that helps you understand or detect something which has happened very recently. So for example, for a trained eye, you could be able to see 4 things which an untrained eye wouldn't be able to. So you could consider imagery analytics or computer vision if you use the term. It helps you look at things which are hidden very deep within a picture. That's where you have another aspect of machine learning coming into picture. So you take an image, you're trying to understand how is this image different than the image that was last collected. What areas of this farm seem like they are into some sort of pressure. It could be disease pressure, it could be pest pressure, it could be any other kind of climatic pressure, it could be wilting pressure, and so on. That's where some of the aspects of machine learning come into picture. From a data collection perspective, again, it could be low Earth orbit satellite, or it could be some of the common satellites that are available, or it could be a farmer's phone while he is scouting. You know, I saw something like this. I don't know what it is. It is too small for me to understand. That's where we leverage some of the imagery aspects. If I have answered his question.
Okay. I think that should be a good answer for Vakar. And Mr. Ramohan wants to know whether it's viable in cost perspective for 1 hectare farmer to install fossil solution.
Definitely. So that's a good question to ask. And that's a question that we asked ourselves in 2017. Technology in itself is not a solution. Technology is the part of a solution. A solution consists of a lot of things. For example, where is it applicable? Whether you understand its applicability. Who is it going to be adopted by? What is the price? I mean, thankfully, we are born in a country, and then it is our strategic advantage over other Western countries, is that we have consumers who bless us with competence, that they don't accept anything which isn't, conscious about the value it is delivering and the price you are going to charge. So we said, if we want to have rapid adoption of fossil, what do we look at? What do we make something as the pivot? So we looked at some of the aspects of technology which have been rapidly which have had seen reasonable amount of penetration in horticulture. So one thing that sort of hit our imagination was drip irrigation. There are certain crops that our farmers know cannot be grown without drip irrigation. We said, if drip irrigation is something that our farmers understand the value of, they also understand the value of value it is delivering and the price that is being charged for it. So if we can build a solution which could be comparative for a 1 hectare farm for a drip irrigation system, even with the subsidy, then we have a winner. Unfortunately, in terms of pricing, we have landed at a cost where the cost of a fossil solution for a hectare is 3 times cheaper than the cost of drip irrigation with subsidy. And we believe this is one factor that we must get right if we have to serve farmers in India. So to answer his question, if you are a farmer, and I mean, our system doesn't allow us to work with farmers who still do not have drip irrigation, because we want to control the exact amount of water delivery that will happen. But if you are a farmer who has drip irrigation, you'll find fossil comparatively cost competent with your drip solution.
Thank you, Shailendra sir. The next question is from a business perspective. What were the challenges that you faced as a first-time entrepreneur in agriculture, coming from the IT background and pitching your idea to such big funding agencies? So how did you prepare yourself for that feat?
Good question again. So I would put it like this, Dr. Chaitra. It's like, companies are a method of solving a problem. There is nothing more to an organization than saying that it is a mechanism for solving a specific problem for a specific customer set. Now, what makes you successful? I mean, for us, we'll have to see in next 5 years what happens. But what typically makes any organization successful is how easy you're building. I mean, whether you understand the depth of that problem, who's facing that problem, whether you understand the customer set properly, whether you've built a product, and only 2 kind of products succeed, to be very honest: products which make money or products which save money for somebody in that ecosystem. Apart from that, if you have a product which isn't doing this, it isn't going to, I mean, in a generic scenario, it isn't going to be a massive success as you would assume. So when we had to pitch, or when we had to go and talk about fossil, not only to investors but to our customers as well. I mean, first your customer needs to understand whether the product is useful to him or not. For a farmer, it is as simple as saying whether my cost of cultivation at the end of the season was lesser as compared to last season or not,
right?
Or whether my quality of the produce was better than last time or not, or whether at any point in this growing cycle, let's say chili we spoke about, whether in last 5, 6, 7 months there was any day where I did not know what was happening. If the farmer or our customer says, no, I have seen a decrease in the input, I can tell you that confidently. No, I have seen a better produce and I have received better price for it. No, I have seen higher quality. Then that's like you got the problem right. Then whether the customer or the farmer is willing to pay you some money, that means he should be able to see that with this solution and its cost combined, I am able to create more money for the cost, which is lesser than the cost of creation of that money. So if I'm, if the cost of Fasal system is 10 rupees, can the farmer save 50? Then when you go to investors, investors are people who would be very keen to understand whether you are genuinely solving a problem or not. If you are solving a problem, what is the depth of that problem? What is the scale of that problem? Why do you believe your solution is the one that works? What is the evidence of that? Who is your customer? Whether they are willing to pay you something for this or not. It's important for them to pay you something for this, because if they don't pay it, who is going to fund this idea? And then what is the use of an idea which cannot survive? If you have to shut down a business because you couldn't generate money, it's of no use, to be very honest. If you get those fundamentals right, if you understand very clearly, explicitly clearly of what is the problem that you are solving, whether it is a problem that is a generation of your mind, whether it is a problem of illusion, you believe it is a problem, or whether people actually believe it is a problem. What could be the probable solution? Whether your solution is something they can understand, whether they can work around with or not. What is the benefit of that solution? How many people are going to buy this solution? So whether there is scale in the market or not, you will do a fairly, good job of going and not only talking to investors, but even if Modi ji calls you someday to ask about it, you will have fair answers.
Okay. In 2018, when you started Fasal, probably you didn't have many competitors because AI in agriculture was relatively new in India. But
Right.
now in the past 2 years, we do have quite a number of startups working in that area. So what do you think is your competitive edge over your competitors?
First, I would like to say this, that it makes me extremely happy that you have a lot of competent people coming into agriculture. I do believe that agriculture is at a cusp. It's 5 years down the line, Dr. Chaitra will be talking about a very different horticulture than we are talking about right now.
Definitely.
And it will only be, one Fasal, India has between various estimates anywhere between 100 million hectares to 200 million hectares of land. One Fasal isn't enough. We need many Fasal to come, and we need people who will solve the spectrum of problem. Agriculture is a very complicated problem. It is influenced by forces that you may not even sometimes understand.
Correct.
So we need lot many Shailendra, we'll need lot many Anand, we'll need lot many Fasals to come and help farmers across. I wish there was a cluster of companies working. In terms of edge, I believe there is always some advantage in being a first mover. We are in one way or another the first company which did prove that technology like IoT or AI could be useful, fruitful for agriculture. We have gone through numerous iteration cycles in terms of the product. And then, when I say numerous iteration cycle, it's like you are iterating everything about your business. You are iterating the way you understand the problem. You are iterating the depth of the problem that you are understanding. You are iterating and understanding who's the best fit to solve this problem. Who's my best customer? What exactly does he want? Who should I talk to? What should I talk to them? What should my product look like? What should product innovation look like 2 years down the line? So in that way, we are lucky because we got access to this problem fairly sooner. And in last 2 years, I am extremely thankful for the people who have joined our team and taken this business further. I mean, when we started, it was just like transplantation, no? And then, a plant is grown by the soil, the farmer, the input, and everything around it. So we are fortunate that we have got really smart people working with us day and night trying to solve some of the pressing issues. So you could say that our understanding, the maturity of our solution, the maturity of understanding of our problem statement is something that we have an edge, and there are other strategic aspects that we have more data, we have more understanding of pathogens and their modeling in real climatic situations. We have gone and deployed so many solutions, so many data collection points that we are able to understand the difference that a pathogen goes through when he's in agroclimatic zone 1 versus 2. Some of our friends who have started in past, they'll have to catch up with that. But keeping that aside, I think the broader statement here is that we are living in an era, and we are witnessing an era where a lot of really smart people are going to jump into agriculture. Yes. And 5 years, 7 years down the line, we will be proud that we took a primary industry and we have really changed it for good.
Yeah. So with the COVID situation, there's a lot of reverse migration from the urban centers, and people are going back to their roots. So now we probably will see a lot of people who were previously in IT or retail or, coming back to farming. That's an option that is open to them. And I'm sure a lot of technology will reach the farm from the labs. And do you have anything to tell these youngsters who are planning to start agriculture in their ancestral land? What would your suggestion or advice to them be?
I wouldn't make a suggestion, but I would request them that you could look at 2020 as an year which brought COVID, or you could look at 2020 as an year which brought us closer to our land, motherland. And then people who are going to their hometown, their villages, they are going with so much knowledge, no? It's like this, Dr. Chaitra. Before Geo came, no, the access to information was very limited. So one farmer would have a spectrum of about 40 kilometers, which was his locus of getting knowledge, right? So when 2016, when Geo came, we had free data, everybody had cell phone, and we started looking at YouTube, and we started looking at WhatsApp groups in which a farmer from Himachal was talking to another farmer from Bangalore saying what is the cost of apple right now. That exposed us to possibilities. What happens typically is as people, what changes us is the ability to understand that something big is possible. Correct. And then that only happens when you have knowledge and understanding of multiple domains. So all the youngsters or all the people who have gone to farm, they should take it as national service to educate their families, to educate their villages that agriculture is broad. Show them videos. If you can take half an acre or take 1/4 of an acre, grow something. I have my uncle who grows paddy in about 60 acres, doesn't know about drip irrigation. Even though paddy and drip irrigation are not analogous, but it's like I had the opportunity of talking to him about drip, and he said, "Oh wow, this is amazing." So it's fascinating that we live in a country where some people may not know about drip irrigation, which is a phenomenal technology. So instead of suggesting, I request all of you, I plead all of you to talk about agriculture, talk about the benefits, talk about technology, talk about examples. If we are able to set one farm in every village, one model farm, where in 1 hectare, and I have grown to believe now that 1 hectare farm can be a profitable farm. Yeah. If we are able to do something around that, if you're able to establish, if you're able to open up imaginations of people, trust me, changing wouldn't take a long time. It's just lack of right examples. If you Google right now, agriculture farmer in India, look at the pictures. I hate them. The representation of an Indian farmer has to change, and that will only flow this way when we will all be exposed to examples of possibilities. That is what 2020 has given us. Whosoever is in their villages, in their hometown, expose people to possibilities, expose them to technology, expose them to examples in which somebody has been able to do phenomenally well with something, with high density mango plantation or a grape plantation, or how much money somebody could make from chili plantation. That is what they need to do.
There are a lot of students and professors from agriculture universities in the audience. So on behalf of them, there's a question that is, do you have internships for students who are eager to work in this area?
Of course. It's like a business is an engine, and it's run by people. The drivers are people. So we are always looking out for bright people. We have quite a few openings right now. If you go on LinkedIn, you'll be able to find find openings around agri research. You'll be able to find openings around sales. You'll be able to find openings around product management. Just apply. Go ahead. We are always looking out for bright people.
That's great. And on behalf of the teaching faculty, now they're looking to have projects probably from you where they can help you with your research using the resources that they have. So are you open to research for professors from the agriculture universities?
1000%. And
That's
not
awesome.
only now, but for next 5, how do I put it? So agriculture is a problem that is solved season after season. And to reach where, I mean, we have a, sort of, you could say founder's fantasy, but I sometimes imagine what would happen if we have offered Fasal solution to about 10 million hectares. What would that be? All the grape farmers, all the apple farmers, all the pineapple farmers, all the pomegranate farmers. And it's not easy. Agriculture, as I started, horticulture especially, is a very unforgiving science. Your crops don't allow you to make a lot of mistakes, and all the help that we can get from academia is I mean, more than they being interested, we are interested.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so that's the questions that we had from our audience. And audience, please look at your chat box. The link to the feedback form has been given there. The link is available only till 12 tonight. So please get your certificates before the link becomes invalid. I thank Mr. Shailendra for taking out his time to join us, and this was really inspiring. We got a lot of insight into the challenges that we have in agriculture today and how they're trying to solve these very critical problems around agriculture. I thank all the attendees on Zoom. And last but not the least, I would like to thank my team at Phoenix Academy for putting up this webinar. Please follow our page on Facebook. It's called Our Phoenix Academy. We have our website, ourphoenixacademy.com, which was launched last week. So please visit us to know more about digital education in agriculture. We have a lot of courses to offer you if you're interested in upskilling yourself. And you can write to us at enquiry@ourphoenixacademy.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you, Mr. Shailendra Tiwari, for giving us your time and joining us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is Dr. Chaitra Bharat signing off.